Hi, sci-fi fans. Welcome to Visionary Stories, in-depth sci-fi stories with an uplifting theme. Please like, subscribe, share, and leave a comment. Thank you.
Catalyst. Chapter 1. Leslie Hart had never been one for crowds or cocktail parties or carefully calculated smiles. No, Leslie had always been sharper than that. Sharper than the world wanted her to be. She was tall, in a gangly sort of way, with a thin frame that never quite filled out the lab coats she favored. Her hair was a perpetual afterthought, dishwater blonde, usually pinned back in a lazy knot. But her eyes were fierce, quick, relentless, the kind of gaze that dissected a problem before you even realized you'd spoken. At 33, Leslie should have been celebrated. Her work in cellular nanotechnology, programming microscopic machines to heal the body from within, had drawn accolades during her PhD years. A mind like hers, some said, could have changed medicine forever. Instead, she spent her days hunched over a sterile workstation at Valentis Corporation, a crown jewel in the rotting empire of Big Pharma. Every project she touched was twisted, not toward cures, but toward control. Treat the symptoms, manage the disease, ensure they kept coming back. Cures were bad for business. And Leslie Hart? Leslie Hart was tired of pretending otherwise. Jack Reynolds pulled into the cracked asphalt parking lot outside the diner they had haunted since college. He spotted Leslie immediately, sitting in the booth by the window, sleeves rolled up, laptop open, a frown etched across her face. Jack was taller, stringy rather than lean, with shaggy brown hair that he never bothered taming. He had the restless energy of someone who lived half a second ahead of reality, a mind always leaping toward some better future. He pushed open the glass door, the bell jingling overhead, and slid into the seat across from her without waiting for an invitation. "You look like hell," he said, grinning. Leslie didn't smile. She reached into her bag, pulled out a folded sheet of paper, and shoved it across the table. Jack unfolded it and skimmed the contents. His smile faded with every line. Exclusive intellectual property agreement. All inventions, discoveries, and concepts developed during employment, whether on or off company time, shall be considered property of Valentis Corporation. He looked up. Leslie was staring out the window, jaw clenched tight. "They're making you sign this?" Jack asked. Leslie nodded once. "Or pack my things?" He leaned back, exhaling sharply. "And I didn't sign," she said, voice steady. Jack blinked. "You serious?" "Dead serious," she said. "They gave me 30 minutes to reconsider. I walked." He let out a low whistle. Most people in their field, in any field, would have bent the knee, signed the damn paper, kept the paycheck, the insurance, the illusion of stability. But not Leslie, never Leslie. Jack stared at her for a long moment, feeling a strange mix of admiration and dread. "What are you going to do?" he asked finally. Leslie shrugged, a brittle motion. "I've got savings. Enough to keep the lights on for a while. And I've got work to do." Jack tapped the paper once, then slid it back across the table. "You're not wrong," he said quietly. "You were never wrong." She smiled then, just a little, a crack in the armor. "You think that'll matter when they come after me?" she asked. Jack grinned, all teeth and defiance. Then, "Let 'em come." The letter came 2 days later. It was delivered by courier, thick white envelope, corporate seal embossed like a brand on the front. Leslie stood at her kitchen counter, barefoot, coffee cooling beside her, staring at it like it might bite. She already knew what it said. before she slid it open with the edge of a butter knife. Inside, official notice of termination. Immediate revocation of access to all research and corporate systems. Reminder of non-compete clauses she had signed years ago, so vague and sweeping they practically forbade her from thinking too hard about medicine, let alone practicing it. And stapled at the back, in smaller font, reminder. Any intellectual property developed during employment, even after separation, remains the sole property of Valentis Corporation. The slip went in once, twice. The edges of the paper crinkled in her fists. They're trying to cage me, she thought, trying to make sure that even my dreams belong to them. She dropped the papers onto the counter, walked to the sink, and turned on the faucet. The letter went in first. Then the staples. She watched the ink bleed away under the water's steady stream, until all that remained was a soggy, useless pulp. Only then did she allow herself to breathe. Jack showed up an hour later. No call, no warning, carrying a cardboard tray with 2 greasy cheeseburgers and a bag of cold fries. He found Leslie sitting on the back steps, staring at the scrubby little backyard she had once dreamed of turning into a garden. He handed her the bag without a word and sat down beside her. For a while they ate in silence. Burgers, cheap beer, the fading sun burning gold across the sky. Finally, Jack said, "So, what's the plan?" Leslie wiped her hands on her jeans and leaned back on her elbows. "The plan is," she said slowly, "to finally work for something that matters." Jack chuckled under his breath. "You're serious," he said. "You're actually gonna do it." She turned her head, meeting his gaze without flinching. "I'm not going to waste the rest of my life fixing diseases they don't want cured." Jack nodded slowly. He could see it now, the quiet fire building behind her tired eyes. "You're going to need a lab," he said. "I'll build one." "You're going to need money." "I've got enough to last 2 years, if I'm careful." "You're going to need time." Leslie smiled grimly. "Time's the only thing they can't take from me," she said. Jack finished the last of his beer and crumpled the can in one hand. "Then let's get started," he said, because that was the thing about Jack Reynolds. He had always believed in Leslie, even when she didn't believe in herself, especially then. The basement had been an afterthought when Leslie bought the house, a spider-webbed of hollow with bad lighting, cracked concrete floors, and the lingering smell of old wood and wet stone. Now it would be the birthplace of something revolutionary, or the tomb of her best intentions. Leslie wasn't sure which yet. She just knew she had to try. The first step was cleaning, scraping, scrubbing, patching her hands raw and bruised before the week was out. She ripped out rotting insulation, sanded and sealed the concrete, installed reinforced wiring capable of supporting her future lab's power demands. Jack showed up most afternoons after his shifts ended, still smelling faintly of machine oil and scorched metal from the aerospace labs. He never complained, never asked why. He just picked up a hammer, a crowbar, a bucket, and worked beside her until they collapsed on the back steps, laughing at how broken they felt. It wasn't much, but it was enough. 2 weeks later, the packages started arriving in droves. Construction bots, skeletal and insectile, humming to life and scuttling across the basement with eerie precision. 3D printers the size of washing machines, capable of layering polymers molecule by molecule. Microfab arrays designed to produce nanite shells, the delicate framework of her microscopic machines. Leslie paid for everything in cash, using third-party vendors, false names where she could. She didn't trust anyone anymore, not when she had seen what corporations did to ideas they couldn't own. Jack sat on an overturned crate one night, watching a microfab printer lay down the first glistening strand of nanite structure under a microscope. "You know," he said, "normal people build model trains or beer brewing kits in their basements." Leslie grinned, exhausted but exhilarated. "I'm not normal people," she said. Jack tilted his head thoughtfully. "No," he agreed. "You're the crazy bastard who might actually save the world." Leslie didn't answer, didn't trust herself to, because deep down she wanted to believe him, wanted it so badly it hurt. But hope was dangerous. Hope could get you killed. For now she would settle for progress. Under the microscope, the first test batch of prototype nanites spun into existence. Microscopic machines with programmable cores, flexible membranes, and mission-specific targeting receptors. A different kind of life, a silent promise of what could be. Leslie leaned closer, heart hammering in her chest. "This is for you, Mom," she whispered into the hum of machines, "and for everyone they left behind." Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, but down in the basement, something brighter than any storm had begun. The call came on a Monday morning. Leslie was in the basement, hunched over a spectrometer, fine-tuning the calibration protocols for her latest nanite batch. The ringtone cut through the hum of machines, sharp and jarring. She almost didn't answer, almost let it ring into silence. There was always one more test to run, one more circuit to align. But something in her gut, cold and coiled, made her reach for the phone. Her mother's voice was calm. Too calm. "Sweetheart," she said, the way she always did, but softer now, thinner, like the thread of a song fraying at the edges. "I need you to come to the hospital." The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, too bright, too sterile. Leslie sat in a hard plastic chair outside the oncology wing, fingers locked so tightly in her lap that her knuckles ached. The doctor's words replayed in her mind like a broken record. Glioblastoma. Aggressive. Inoperable. 6 months, maybe less. Jack sat beside her, silent, anchoring her to the moment with his presence alone. She didn't remember texting him, didn't remember asking him to come. But there he was, and somehow that made it easier to breathe. Her mother was waiting in a small private room propped up against a mountain of 2 white pillows, IV lines snaking into her veins. She looked smaller. Fragile in a way Leslie had never seen, but her smile, that smile was still the same. Leslie pulled a chair closer and sat, hands trembling. "They're wrong," Leslie said, voice cracking despite her best effort. "I can fix this." Her mother reached out, brushing a strand of hair from Leslie's forehead the way she had when Leslie was a child, waking from nightmares. "Baby," she said gently, "some things aren't meant to be fixed." Leslie shook her head violently. "No, not this, not you." Her mother's eyes, green flecked with gray, so full of fierce, stubborn love, softened. "Tell me," she said, voice steady, "what you're working on." Leslie told her everything, about the nanites, about the programmable targeting, about the dream she had fought so hard to protect, now suddenly so impossibly intimately urgent. And when she finished, her mother simply smiled. "It sounds like a miracle," she said. "It's not ready," Leslie whispered. "There's no clinical data, no safety trials. It's a gamble." Her mother squeezed her hand. "I don't have time for safety trials." Silence hung between them. Then her mother said simply, "I trust you." Leslie sat at her workstation, staring at the coding window until her eyes blurred. Outside, the world moved on, the distant hum of traffic, the heartbeat of a city that didn't know, didn't care about one life flickering out. But here, in the hollow of her basement lab, Leslie coded like her mother's life depended on it. Because it did. She rewrote the nanite programming. New targeting algorithms, fail-safe shutdown sequences, emergency isolation protocols. She mapped and modeled and simulated until her fingers ached and her vision swam. There was no room for error. Not this time. Not ever again. The first vial sat in a sterile tray, no bigger than a fingertip. Clear fluid, shimmering faintly under the basement's overhead lights, almost nothing to look at. But it held everything. Hope. Terror. A daughter's impossible gamble against death itself. Leslie adjusted the injector's settings one last time, her hands steady even as her heart rattled against her ribs. Her mother lay back against the pillows, calm, ready. Jack stood by the door, pale but silent. He had argued, of course, told her to wait, to think. But in the end, he knew better than to stand between Leslie Hart and the people she loved. Leslie knelt by the bedside, the vial clipped carefully into the injector. "I can't promise anything," she said softly. "I can't even promise it won't make things worse." Her mother smiled, that same tired, fearless smile. "Promise me you'll keep trying," she said. Leslie nodded once. Jack looked out the door and gave Leslie the all-clear sign. She pressed the injector to her mother's vein. A soft hiss, a shiver under the skin. Then, nothing. No flash of light, no miracle chorus. Just an old woman smiling at her daughter like she had always known it would come to this. 1 week later, the scans told the story before the doctors could even stammer the words. Tumor mass reduced by 30%. No signs of hemorrhage, infection, or abnormal cell activity. Blood markers trending back toward normal. By the end of the 2nd week, the tumor was gone. Not in remission, gone, as if it had never been there at all. The hospital erupted behind closed doors. Whispers, suspicion. How could this happen without surgery, without radiation, without even so much as a clinical trial? Leslie kept her head down. Her mother's recovery framed as a spontaneous remission, an outlier, an anomaly, a statistical miracle that no one could explain but everyone wanted to pick apart. She knew it wouldn't stay quiet forever. But for now, for today, her mother was alive, and Leslie had proof. Proof her work wasn't madness. Proof they were wrong. She watched the diagnostic report scroll across the screen. Immune response logs, nanite metabolic pathways, targeted cellular apoptosis. It was beautiful, precise, elegant, and completely illegal by every standard medical board in the country. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the cracked concrete ceiling, the hum of the machines a soft heartbeat in the dark. "You're not done," she whispered to herself. Not by a long shot. Because somewhere out there they were already sharpening their knives, Narrated preparing to tear apart whatever they couldn't control, and Leslie Hart had just may have made herself the most dangerous woman in medicine.